Have you ever listened to a story and realized, halfway through, that you understood every single word without translating a single one? That is exactly what is going to happen to you in the next few minutes. Say this out loud right now, wherever you are. Today, I am going to learn through a story. Good, because today, you are not just going to memorize a list of words. You are going to walk beside a real character through a real turning point in his life. And by the end of this video, 50 advanced English words and expressions are going to feel like they belong to you, not like they belong to a dictionary. I'm Emma, and this is Natural Word English, the channel where you learn advanced vocabulary the way it was always meant to be learned. Inside real life, inside real emotion, inside a story you actually care about. If this is your first time here, welcome. We upload new advanced vocabulary lessons regularly, and every single one is built the same way. Not a random word list, but real context you can actually use. Before we start, let me explain something in under 90 seconds, because it changes everything about how fast you improve. Most learners memorize a word by itself, like a name with no face attached to it. You see the word resilient, you see the translation, and 3 days later, it's gone because your brain never connected it to anything real. But when you learn a word inside a story, your brain does something completely different. It attaches that word to an image, a feeling, a character, a moment. And a word that's attached to a memory doesn't disappear. That's why today, instead of a list, you're getting a story, one character, one turning point. And around him, the exact advanced vocabulary that native speakers reach for when they talk about pressure, personality, and starting over. Ready? Let's begin. Picture this. It's 6:15 in the morning, and the sky outside is still a deep, uncertain gray. Daniel Reyes is standing in the kitchen of an apartment that doesn't feel like his yet, holding a cup of coffee he hasn't touched, staring at a suit hanging on the back of the door. 3 weeks ago, he packed his entire life into 2 suitcases and moved to a city where he doesn't know a single person for a job that could either save his career or expose exactly how unready he is for it. His stomach is tight. His hands are a little cold. This is our story today, and I want you to notice something right from the start. This feeling Daniel has, this heavy, nervous, uncertain feeling before something big, English has a beautiful, precise word for it. Not scared, not worried. The word is apprehensive. Apprehensive means feeling anxious or fearful about something that is going to happen, especially something uncertain. It's more specific than scared, because scared can mean anything from a spider to a car accident. Apprehensive is that particular anticipatory nervousness about the future. If you've ever had a big exam tomorrow, a first date tonight, or a job that starts in 1 hour, you already know exactly what apprehensive feels like. Here's how it sounds in real life. Someone might say, "I'm a little apprehensive about the presentation this afternoon, to be honest." Or, "She seemed apprehensive when she walked into the interview room." Now, shadow this with me, right now, out loud. I'm feeling apprehensive about tomorrow. Say it again, a little faster this time. I'm feeling apprehensive about tomorrow. Notice how natural speakers connect the words. Feeling apprehensive often blends together, almost like feelin' apprehensive, with the sounds sliding into each other instead of being cut apart. Try that connected version once more before we move on. Daniel looks at his phone. 6:45. He has exactly 1 hour before he needs to walk into a building he's never seen to meet people whose names he's already forgotten for a job that felt exciting on paper and now feels, frankly, daunting. Daunting is our second word. And it pairs perfectly with apprehensive because they often show up together. Daunting describes a task, a challenge, or a situation that seems so difficult or intimidating that it makes you feel a little discouraged before you even start. A daunting task isn't just hard. It's hard in a way that makes your confidence shrink a little just by looking at it. Think of the basic word difficult. Now upgrade it. Instead of saying, "This project is really difficult," a fluent speaker says, "This project is genuinely daunting." Instead of, "That mountain looks hard to climb," you'd hear, "That mountain looks absolutely daunting from here." Let's shadow it. This new job feels daunting. One more time, a little slower so you catch every sound. This new job feels daunting. Good. Notice the T in daunting is soft, almost swallowed, the way Americans often do with a T between two vowel-like sounds. Daniel finally walks outside, and the city feels enormous and unfamiliar around him. Everything, the street signs, the coffee shop on the corner, even the rhythm of people walking, feels unfamiliar, like he's reading a book in a language he only half knows. Unfamiliar simply means not known or not recognized, the opposite of familiar. But notice how much more natural and specific it sounds than just saying new or strange. The city felt unfamiliar paints a picture. The city was new is flat, a fact with no feeling in it. Try this sentence with me. Everything here feels so unfamiliar. Shadow it. Everything here feels so unfamiliar. Good. By the time Daniel reaches the office building, his mind is racing with small worries, stacking on top of each other. The elevator is slow. His shirt feels too tight, and for one long moment, standing in the lobby, he feels completely disoriented, like he genuinely doesn't know which direction the front desk is, even though it's right in front of him. Disoriented is a powerful upgrade from confused. It specifically describes that feeling of having lost your sense of direction or your sense of clarity, whether that's physically, in a place, or mentally, in a moment of stress. A jet-lagged traveler stepping off a 14-hour flight is disoriented. Someone who just woke up from a nap in an unfamiliar room is disoriented. Shadow this with me. I felt completely disoriented for a second. Again, a bit faster. I felt completely disoriented for a second. Take a breath with me here, because Daniel does too. He stands still in that lobby for exactly 3 seconds, closes his eyes, and reminds himself of something his grandmother used to tell him. That he has survived every difficult day of his life. So far, 100% of them. And this one will be no different. And that reminds him, and reminds us, of the deepest word in today's story, resilient. Resilient describes a person, or a material, or even a community that is able to recover quickly from difficulties, that bends under pressure instead of breaking. It's one of the most respected words you can use to describe someone's character in English, because it doesn't mean someone who never struggles. It means someone who struggles and keeps getting back up. Instead of the basic phrase, "he's strong," a fluent speaker says, "he's incredibly resilient." He's resilient. Instead of "she doesn't give up," you'll hear, "she's one of the most resilient people I know." Shadow it with me now, slowly first. I am more resilient than I think. Now faster, the way you'd say it in a real conversation. I am more resilient than I think. One more time, feel the rhythm. I am more resilient than I think. Nice work. You've just learned 4 words that most textbooks would never put in the same lesson, and yet you learned them the way your brain actually remembers things, attached to a real person in a real moment. That's exactly how this entire story is going to work. Now, let's step fully into the lobby with Daniel, because this is where our first full conversation happens, and I want you to really picture it before we listen. The lobby is bright, all glass and pale stone, with the quiet hum of an espresso machine somewhere behind the front desk, and a receptionist named Priya. Glancing up as Daniel approaches, his badge application still folded in his hand. Listen to this conversation first, all the way through, before we shadow it piece by piece. Priya says, "Good morning, welcome to Halden Group. Are you here for an interview or a first day?" Daniel answers, "A first day, actually." Daniel Reyes, starting in the marketing department. Priya smiles and says, "Oh, we've been expecting you. Everyone said you seemed really composed on the phone during your final interview, by the way." Daniel laughs a little and says, "Composed on the phone? Maybe. In person, I'll admit I'm a bit more apprehensive than I sound." Priya says, "Honestly, that's completely normal. Everyone feels that way on day 1. Give it a week, and you'll feel like you've worked here for years." Daniel replies, "I really hope so. I want to come across as confident, even if I'm still finding my footing. Let's slow this down and shadow it together. Repeat after me. Good morning. Welcome to Halden Group. Again, are you here for an interview or a first day?" Now Daniel's line. "A first day, actually." One more time with the rhythm. "A first day, actually." Daniel's Reyes, starting in the marketing department. Good. Now here's a new word inside that dialogue you may have caught. composed. Composed means calm, in control of your emotions, especially in a situation where you might be expected to feel nervous or upset. It's the opposite of falling apart under pressure. A composed person doesn't necessarily feel calm inside, but they present themselves with control. That's an important distinction, and it's exactly Daniel's situation. He sounded composed on the phone, but internally he was apprehensive. Shadow this sentence. She stayed remarkably composed during the crisis. Again, she stayed remarkably composed during the crisis. Try the shorter, punchier version too. Just try to stay composed. One more time. Just try to stay composed. Now, let's practice the role switch technique, because this is one of the fastest ways to move a word from your memory into your mouth. I'm going to read Priya's line, and then I want you to actually pause this video out loud, playing Daniel, answering in your own words, using at least one of today's words if you can: apprehensive, daunting, unfamiliar, disoriented, resilient, or composed. Here's Priya's line. So, be honest. How are you feeling about your first day? Now pause and answer as Daniel, in your own words. Take a real few seconds. Don't rush this. Here's a model answer, in case you want to compare. Daniel might say, "Honest, I'm a little apprehensive. Everything here still feels unfamiliar, but I'm trying to stay composed and remind myself I'm more resilient than I feel right now." Notice how naturally those 5 words fit into one honest human sentence. That's the goal, not memorizing them separately, but being able to reach for them the way Daniel just did. Let's talk about how native speakers actually say some of these words quickly. E, 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 because reading them slowly on a page is very different from hearing them in fast, real conversation. Take the phrase, "I'm a little apprehensive." Spoken slowly, you'd hear every syllable clearly. I am a little apprehensive. But in fast, natural speech, it often compresses into something closer to I'm a little apprehensive, with I'm blending almost into one beat, and a little nearly disappearing into a little with that American flap sound, turning the T into something closer to a soft D. Listen to the difference. Slow. I am a little apprehensive. Fast and natural. I'm a little apprehensive. Try saying the fast version yourself. Twice. You're doing great so far. And I want you to notice something. You haven't memorized a single isolated word today. You've walked through a lobby with Daniel, heard his heartbeat, basically, in the vocabulary itself. And you're already starting to think the way this story thinks. That's real progress, and it's only been a few minutes. Let's continue the story. After his badge is printed, Daniel is led through a set of glass doors into the marketing department. And this is where he meets his new manager, a woman named Grace Whitfield, who turns out to be exactly the kind of person this next block of vocabulary was written for. Grace. Grace has a reputation. Daniel will learn over the next few weeks for being extremely meticulous, someone who reads every document twice, who never lets a small mistake slide, but who is also, somewhat surprisingly, one of the most approachable managers in the entire building. Let's take those two words one at a time, because they represent a contrast that native speakers love to describe in exactly this way. Meticulous means showing great attention to detail, being extremely careful and precise, sometimes to the point of being a perfectionist. It's a step up from just saying someone is careful. A careful person double checks their work. A meticulous person triple checks it, organizes it, color codes it, and still finds one more thing to improve. Shadow it with me. She's incredibly meticulous about her work. Again, slightly faster. She's incredibly meticulous about her work. Try it in a shorter form too. He's a meticulous planner. One more time. He's a meticulous planner. Now, approachable. Approachable describes someone who is easy and pleasant to talk to, someone who doesn't feel intimidating, even if they hold a position of authority. It's often used specifically to soften the image of someone powerful or important, showing that despite their status, you can walk up to them comfortably. Instead of the plain phrase, "she's nice," which honestly tells you very little, a fluent speaker says, "she's really approachable," which tells you something specific and useful, that you won't feel nervous knocking on her door. Shadow this sentence. My manager is surprisingly approachable. Again, my manager is surprisingly approachable. Nice work. You're stacking real character description into your English now, not just adjectives. Let's step into a visualization together before the next dialogue, because this conversation matters. And I want you to really see it first. Imagine a small glass-walled office, mid-morning light coming through the window, a slightly messy desk covered in color-coded folders, and Grace leaning back in her chair, arms crossed, studying Daniel with a look that isn't unfriendly, just evaluating. Daniel is standing near the doorway, his badge still warm in his pocket, trying to look more confident than he feels. Listen to the full conversation first. Grace says, "So, Daniel, tell me honestly, what's your biggest concern walking into this role?" Daniel answers, "Honestly, I think it's that everyone here seems so meticulous, and I don't want to be the person who misses something important in my first month." Grace responds, "That's a fair concern. But let me tell you something. I'd rather have someone candid about their worries on day one than someone who pretends they have it all figured out." Daniel says, "I appreciate that. I'd rather be upfront too. It feels more honest than pretending." Grace smiles and says, "Good. And for what it's worth, most people find me more approachable than they expect. My door is always open, literally and otherwise." Daniel replies, "That actually makes me feel a lot better. I was expecting someone a bit more intimidating." Let's shadow this piece by piece. So, Daniel, Tell me honestly, what's your biggest concern walking into this role? Again, a little faster, the way Grace would really say it. What's your biggest concern walking into this role? Now, Daniel's answer. Honestly, I think it's that everyone here seems so meticulous. One more time. Everyone here seems so meticulous. Notice a new word just appeared. Candid. Candid means being open, honest, and direct, especially about things that might be uncomfortable or personal to admit. It's a stronger, richer word than just honest, because candid carries the idea of choosing honesty, even when it would be easier to hide something. A candid answer in an interview is a risk, and that's exactly why it's respected. Shadow it. I appreciate how candid you are. Again, I appreciate how candid you are. And the related phrase Daniel uses, upfront, works almost the same way. To be upfront about something means to state it clearly and honestly from the very beginning, without hiding it. Shadow this. I'd rather be upfront about it. One more time. I'd rather be upfront about it. Now let's practice the role switch technique again, because Grace's question is one you might genuinely be asked in real life. In English, someday. Here's her line one more time. Tell me honestly, what's your biggest concern walking into this role? Pause the video now and answer as if you were Daniel, or as if you were yourself in a real interview, trying to use candid, upfront, meticulous, or approachable somewhere in your answer. Take your time. Here's a model answer to compare against. Honestly, I'd say my biggest concern is fitting in with a team that seems so meticulous, but I want to be candid. I'm someone who learns fast once I understand the expectations. See how those words slide into a completely natural, human sentence, the kind you could actually say in a real interview tomorrow? Well, let's do a quick phonetics moment before we move to the next block. In fast speech, what's your often blends together into something closer to watcher, and biggest concern carries the main stress on big and con, while the smaller words around them fade into the background. Listen to the difference, slowly. What is your biggest concern? Naturally. Watcher biggest concern. Try the fast version yourself, twice, feeling how the stress lands hard on big and con, while everything else gets quieter and quicker. That is real, genuine progress, and I want you to notice it. You've now learned 8 advanced words: apprehensive, daunting, unfamiliar, disoriented, resilient, composed, meticulous, approachable, candid, and upfront. And every single one of them arrived attached to a real character, a real feeling, a real moment in Daniel's first hour at a new job. That's 10 words already, not from a list, but from a life. And we've only just walked through the front door. Type 1 when you're ready. And we'll keep walking through Daniel's story together into his first team meeting, his first real challenge, and the moment everything starts to shift for him. Daniel follows Grace out of her office and down a short hallway into a conference room where 5 other people are already seated around an oval table. Laptops open, coffee cups scattered between them. This is the marketing team's Monday morning meeting, and Daniel slides into the last open chair, trying to look like he belongs there already, even though internally he's cataloging every face, every name, every small detail he's terrified of forgetting. The first thing he notices is a man near the window, mid-30s, leaning back with his arms folded, occasionally rolling his eyes at things other people say. His name, Daniel, will learn, is Marcus. And Marcus has a reputation on the team for being blunt. Blunt to the point of rudeness, someone who says exactly what he thinks without softening it at all. Across from Marcus sits a woman named Priya, no relation to the receptionist, who seems to be the opposite in almost every way. Someone whose comments are careful, warm, and clearly thought through before she says them. This contrast gives us our next pair of words. Blunt describes someone who speaks in a very direct, sometimes harsh way, without worrying about softening their words or protecting other people's feelings. It's not necessarily meant to be cruel, but it often comes across that way because there's no cushioning around the honesty. Instead of the plain phrase, "He says what he thinks," a fluent speaker says, "He's incredibly blunt," which instantly tells you something about how conversations with him actually feel. Shadow this with me. He can be pretty blunt sometimes. Again, a little faster. He can be pretty blunt sometimes. And here's a short, punchy version you'll hear constantly in real conversation. Don't take it personally. He's just blunt. One more time. Don't take it personally. He's just blunt. Now, the word that describes Priya's style. Tactful. Tactful means having or showing sensitivity in dealing with other people, especially in difficult situations. Choosing your words carefully so you don't cause offense while still being honest. Notice that tactful isn't the opposite of honest. It's honest delivered with care. A blunt person tells you your idea won't work. A tactful person tells you your idea has real potential and then gently explains what might need adjusting. Shadow it. She's always so tactful in meetings. Again, she's always so tactful in meetings. Try this version too. Try to be a little more tactful. One more time, feel the rhythm. Try to be a little more tactful. The meeting begins, and Grace opens with a question that immediately puts Daniel on the spot, not in a cruel way, but in the completely ordinary way new employees get pulled into conversations before they're ready. Let's set the scene before we listen. The room is quiet, except for the low hum of the air conditioning, laptops glowing, everyone's attention shifting toward the newest face at the table. Daniel feels his pulse pick up slightly, that same apprehensive energy from this morning, quietly returning. Listen to the full conversation first. Grace says, Daniel, since you're new, I'd love a completely honest first impression. What do you think of the campaign concept Marcus presented last week? Last week, Daniel hesitates, then says, honestly, I think the core idea is strong, but I found parts of the messaging a little unclear, especially the second slide. Marcus, without missing a beat, says, "Unclear." I thought that slide was the clearest part of the whole deck. Priya jumps in gently and says, "I think what Daniel might mean is that the language felt a bit technical for the audience we're targeting. Is that fair, Daniel?" Daniel nods and says, "Exactly, yes. I just think it could land more powerfully with slightly simpler wording." Marcus shrugs and says, "Fair enough. I can be pretty blunt about my own work too, so I'd rather hear it now than after launch." Grace smiles and says, "This is exactly the kind of dynamic I want on this team. Candid feedback, delivered constructively. Let's shadow this piece by piece. Daniel, since you're new, I'd love a completely honest first impression." Again, slightly faster. "I'd love a completely honest first impression." Now Daniel's response. "Honestly, I think the core idea is strong." One more time. "I found parts of the messaging a little unclear." Notice the word constructively at the end of Grace's line. Constructive describes feedback, criticism, or suggestions that are intended to help someone improve, rather than just criticize them for the sake of it. It's one of the most useful words in any workplace conversation in English because it draws a clear line between "you're wrong" and "here's how this could be even better." Shadow this. I want this to be constructive feedback, not just criticism. Again, that's really constructive feedback. Thank you. One more time. Notice the stress on the second syllable, tive. Constructive. Constructive feedback. Now, let's do the role switch technique again, because this is exactly the kind of moment you might face in a real meeting. Someday, in English, being asked to give honest feedback to someone you've just met. Here's Grace's original question one more time. "I'd love a completely honest first impression. What did you think?" Pause the video now and answer as if you were Daniel, giving genuinely constructive, tactful, but candid feedback about something, anything, a plan, an idea, a piece of work. Try to use at least one of today's words. Take a real few seconds before you continue. Here's a model answer for comparison. Honestly, I think the overall direction is strong, but I want to be candid. A couple of sections felt a little unclear to me, and I think some small adjustments could make it land even better. Notice how naturally that balances honesty with tact, exactly the skill this whole scene was built to teach you. Let's pause here for just a moment, the way Daniel does internally, and take a breath together. This meeting, which felt daunting before it even started, is already going better than he expected. He gave honest feedback, the room didn't collapse, and Marcus, of all people, respected it. That's real progress in the story and in your English, and I want you to notice it the same way Daniel is quietly noticing it inside his own head. Right now, let's shift into a phonetics moment before we continue. In fast, natural speech, I'd love A often compresses into something closer to idluva, with the of sound disappearing almost completely and the words melting into each other. Listen to the difference. Slowly, I would love a completely honest first impression. Naturally, quickly, I'd luva, completely honest first impression. Try saying the fast version yourself, twice, feeling how much smoother and quicker it sounds compared to the careful textbook version. After the meeting, Grace asks Daniel to stay behind for a moment, and this next scene introduces a slightly different kind of vocabulary. Fifth to the den, words about capability, potential, and the way people describe what someone is good at, rather than just how they behave. Picture this: the conference room emptying out, chairs pushed back at odd angles, Grace gathering her folders while Daniel lingers near the door, unsure if he's in trouble or about to be praised. Grace looks up and says, "I want to be honest with you. I wasn't sure about hiring someone without industry experience, but your resume showed real versatility and today confirmed it." Daniel says, "That means a lot. Thank you. I've always thought being adaptable was more valuable than being specialized in just one thing." Grace continues, "Exactly. And what I saw today wasn't just versatility. It was aptitude. You picked up on a messaging problem most people wouldn't have caught on day one." Daniel replies, "I appreciate that, honestly. I think I just have a decent instinct for how an audience will actually receive something." Grace nods and says, "That instinct is rare. Combine it with a little more experience, and you're going to be an incredibly competent member of this team." Let's take these words one at a time, because they matter, and Daniel is going to need every one of them in the months ahead. Versatility, the noun form of versatile, describes the quality of being able to adapt to many different functions, situations, or activities. A versatile employee isn't just good at one thing. They can shift between different types of tasks and still perform well. Shadow this. Your resume showed real versatility. Again, she's known for her versatility on the team. One more time. Real versatility. Aptitude describes a natural ability or talent for doing something, often something that comes to a person more easily or intuitively than it does to others. It's slightly different from skill, because skill can be trained over years, while aptitude suggests a kind of natural starting advantage. Shadow it. You have a real aptitude for this. Again, slower this time so you catch the rhythm. A real aptitude for this. Now faster, the way it's actually said. You have a real aptitude for this. And finally, competent, a word that sounds simple but carries real weight in a professional context. Competent means having the necessary skill, knowledge, or ability to do something successfully and efficiently. It's a word of genuine respect in the workplace, because being called competent means people trust your work without needing to double-check it constantly. Shadow this. You're going to be a highly competent member of this team. Again, a highly competent member. One more time, feel the stress. Calm, pay tent. Let's do one more visualization and dialogue before we shift into our listening and shadowing techniques. Block. Picture Daniel walking to his new desk for the first time. A small corner space near a window, a stack of blank folders waiting for him, and a colleague named Owen leaning over the divider with a friendly, slightly mischievous grin, clearly ready to unofficially welcome the newest member of the team. Listen to the full conversation first. Owen says, "So, you survived the Monday meeting and you actually disagreed with Marcus on your first day. Bold move." Daniel laughs and says, "I didn't realize it was such a big deal until Priya's face when I said it." Owen replies, "Honestly, it's a good sign. Grace respects people who are forthright, even if it makes the room a little uncomfortable for 30 seconds. Daniel says, "Forthright. I like that word. It sounds a lot better than awkwardly opinionated, which is how I'd have described myself." Owen laughs and says, "Trust me, forthright will serve you a lot better around here than staying quiet ever would. Let's shadow this together." So, you survived the Monday meeting. Again, you actually disagreed with Marcus on your first day. Now the key word here, forthright. Forthright means direct and honest in manner or speech, especially in expressing your opinions, without hesitation. Very close to candid, but forthright carries a slightly bolder, more confident energy. It's not just honest, it's honest without hesitation. Shadow it. He's known for being forthright in meetings. Again, I try to be forthright even when it's uncomfortable. One more time. Forthright. You've just added 5 more words to your growing collection: blunt, tactful, constructive, versatility, aptitude, competent, and forthright. 7, actually, and every one of them arrived through a real conversation between real characters whose names you now recognize. That's the power of learning inside a story, and we're only about a third of the way through Daniel's day. Let's shift gears for a moment, because I want to teach you something that will change how you listen to English forever. Not just today's story, but every podcast, every movie, every real conversation you encounter from now on. It's called shadowing. And while you've been doing a simplified version of it, this entire video, I want to explain the real technique properly. Because most people do it wrong. Real shadowing means listening to a sentence and repeating it back almost simultaneously, like an echo. Not waiting until the sentence finishes and then reciting it from memory, but speaking right on the heels of what you hear, sometimes even overlapping slightly. It trains your mouth and your brain to process English in real time, the way you'll need to when you're actually in a conversation and don't have 3 seconds to think before responding. Let's try it properly right now. I'm going to say a sentence, and I want you to start repeating almost immediately, not waiting for me to finish. Here it is. I want to be more forthright. even when it feels uncomfortable. Try shadowing that sentence again, starting your repetition just half a second behind mine, like a close echo, not a delayed recitation. Now let's talk about something equally important: catching the main idea. When someone speaks quickly, without needing to understand every single word. This is one of the biggest differences between intermediate and advanced English learners. An intermediate learner panics the moment they miss a word. An advanced learner lets that missing word go, focuses on the shape of the sentence, uses on, and responds naturally with phrases like, "I see, that makes sense," or "Right, got it," even when they didn't catch every syllable. Native speakers do this constantly with each other, and it's not cheating. It's actually how real listening works. Practice this response with me now. Imagine someone just said something fast and you caught the general idea, but not every word. Say this out loud. "Right, that makes sense." Again, with a natural, easy tone. "I see, that makes sense." One more time, like you're really in that conversation. "Right, got it, makes sense." Type 1 when you're ready to continue, and we'll follow Daniel into his first real challenge of the day. A moment where everything he's learned so far actually gets tested. Around 11 o'clock, Daniel is still settling into his new desk, arranging folders in an order that feels almost too optimistic, when Grace appears at the edge of his cubicle with an expression that instantly changes the mood of the entire floor. Her voice is calm, but there's an unmistakable urgency underneath it. Let's set the scene before we listen. The office, which had felt quietly productive just minutes earlier, is suddenly buzzing. Phones lighting up. Two people already gathered around a laptop screen, someone saying, "Wait, is this real?" Under their breath, a major client's social media account has just posted something completely wrong, an old, unapproved version of an ad sent out to nearly 200,000 followers by mistake, and the client is already calling, clearly upset. Grace says, "Daniel, I know it's your first day, but I need every hand on deck right now. We've got a situation." Daniel replies, "Of course. What do you need me to do?" Grace continues, "Marcus is completely inundated with client calls right now, so I need you to help draft a response statement while Priya handles the social media side." Daniel says, "Understood. Give me 5 minutes and I'll have a first draft ready." Marcus, walking past with his phone pressed to his ear, mutters, "Honestly, I'm getting a little exasperated. This is the third call in 10 minutes saying basically the same thing." Grace responds calmly, "Stay tenacious, Marcus. We'll get through this. We always do." Priya adds, "The most prudent move right now is probably to acknowledge the mistake publicly before anyone else does it for us." Let's shadow this together, because this vocabulary is genuinely useful in any high-pressure workplace situation. First, I know it's your first day, but I need every hand on deck right now. Again, a little faster, the way Grace would really say it under pressure. I need every hand on deck right now. Now Daniel's response. Of course, what do you need me to do? One more time, with confidence in your voice. Of course, what do you need me to do? Let's break down the word inundated. Inundated, literally, comes from the idea of being flooded, and it's used to describe someone who is completely overwhelmed with an amount of something, usually work, requests, or messages that feels almost impossible to keep up with. It's a stronger, more vivid upgrade from the basic word busy. Saying I'm busy barely communicates anything. Saying I'm completely inundated with calls right now paints an actual picture. Water rising, no room to breathe. Shadow this. Marcus is completely inundated with client calls. Again, I've been absolutely inundated with emails today. One more time, feel the weight of the word, inundated. Now, exasperated. Exasperated describes a feeling of intense irritation or frustration, usually built from repeated annoyances rather than one single event. Exactly Marcus's situation, hearing the same complaint for the third time in 10 minutes. It's stronger than annoyed, and it specifically implies that your patience is running out because something keeps happening again and again. Shadow it. I'm getting a little exasperated, honestly. Again, she sighed, clearly exasperated. One more time, notice the stress falls on the third syllable. Exasperated. Next, tenacious. Tenacious describes someone who holds firmly to a course of action or a goal, refusing to give up even when things get difficult. Very close to resilient. But tenacious carries a slightly more active, determined energy. Resilient is about recovering. Tenacious is about refusing to let go in the first place. Shadow this. Stay tenacious, we'll get through this. Again, she's incredibly tenacious when she believes in something. One more time. Tenacious. And finally, prudent, which describes acting with careful, sensible judgment, especially about future consequences, essentially making the wise, cautious choice rather than the risky one. Priya's suggestion is a perfect example. The prudent move is the one that avoids bigger problems down the road. Shadow it. The most prudent move is to acknowledge the mistake publicly. Again, it would be prudent to double-check this before sending it. One more time. Prudent. Now let's practice the role switch technique with this crisis scene, because being able to respond calmly and clearly under pressure in English is an incredibly valuable real-life skill. Here's Grace's line one more time. I know it's your first day, but I need every hand on deck right now. Are you okay to help? Pause the video now and answer as if you were Daniel, staying calm and capable under pressure. Trying to use inundated, exasperated, tenacious, or prudent somewhere in your response. Take a real few seconds. Here's a model answer for comparison. Of course, I understand, honestly. I think the most prudent thing would be for me to draft a quick response while you handle the calls. I know everyone's a little exasperated right now, but we'll stay tenacious and get through it. First, notice how that response doesn't just answer the question. It demonstrates leadership, calm, and vocabulary control, all in one breath. Daniel sits down at his laptop, and this next part of the story is quieter, more internal, the kind of moment where a character's inner thoughts matter as much as anything spoken out loud. His fingers hover over the keyboard for a second, and then something shifts. Instead of panicking, he starts writing. Calm and resourceful, pulling together a clear, professional response in under 10 minutes. Waffles describes someone who is able to find quick, clever ways to overcome difficulties, especially by making good use of whatever is available to them, rather than waiting for perfect conditions or outside help. It's one of the most respected qualities in a fast-moving workplace because resourceful people solve problems instead of just reporting them. Shadow this. He handled the crisis in a remarkably resourceful way. Again, she's always so resourceful under pressure. One more time. Resourceful. 15 minutes later, the statement is approved, posted, and the client, while still frustrated, is visibly calmer on the phone with Marcus. Grace walks past Daniel's desks, stops, and looks at him with something between surprise and genuine respect. Let's listen to this short but meaningful exchange. Grace says, "That response you drafted was excellent, genuinely. It was clear, it was calm, and honestly, it saved us a lot of damage control." Daniel replies, "Thank you. I just tried to think about what would actually reassure the client, rather than just apologizing without any real substance." Grace nods and says, "That instinct, thinking about what reassures people instead of just what sounds good, that's rare, and it's exactly the kind of initiative I hoped I was hiring." Daniel smiles, a little relieved, and says, "I'm just glad it worked. I was fairly apprehensive. I might make things worse on my first day, not better. Let's shadow this together. That response you drafted was excellent, genuinely." Again, slightly faster. "It was clear, it was calm, and it saved us a lot of damage control." Now Daniel's line. "I just tried to think about what would actually reassure the client." One more time. What would actually reassure the client? Two new words here worth pulling apart. First, reassure, a verb meaning to say or do something that removes someone's doubts or fears, to restore their confidence. It's different from just comfort, because reassure specifically targets uncertainty or worry. It's aimed at reducing fear, not just providing general emotional support. Shadow it. I wanted to reassure the client that we were handling it. Again, let me reassure you, everything is under control. One more time. Reassure. And initiative, a noun describing the ability to assess and start things independently, taking action without needing to be told exactly what to do. Having initiative is one of the highest compliments you can receive in a professional context in English because it signals that someone trusts your judgment enough to let you act on your own. Shadow this. That's exactly the kind of initiative I hoped I was hiring. Again, she always shows real initiative on new projects. One more time. Initiative. Let's pause here. The way Daniel does, standing at his desk, feeling something shift quietly inside him. This morning, he felt apprehensive and disoriented, unsure if he belonged in this unfamiliar building at all. Now, just a few hours later, he's helped handle a genuine crisis, and his manager just used the word initiative to describe him. That's not a small shift. That's the entire emotional engine of today's story. And I want you to notice how naturally all of these words have carried that shift for you without you ever sitting down to memorize a list. Let's take a short, quieter moment now, the kind of pause this story needs before its final stretch. Take a breath with me, in through your nose and slowly out. Around 1 o'clock, the office noise settles. Most of the team steps out for lunch, and Daniel finds himself alone at his desk. For the first time all day, the adrenaline of the crisis slowly fading into something calmer, something closer to quiet satisfaction. We'll stay in this softer moment for just a little while. Before the story picks back up, let's use this quieter section to practice something powerful, describing your surroundings, using your senses, the exact way Daniel might silently do right now, sitting at his desk, letting the morning settle. This kind of self-talk, describing what you see, hear, and feel around you in English, using real vocabulary instead of basic words, is one of the fastest ways to turn today's words into an automatic reflex outside of this video. Try this.
Try this with me.
Look around wherever you are right now, and instead of saying simple sentences like, "The room is quiet," or "I feel tired," try building something a little richer using today's vocabulary. For example, you might say, "The office feels unfamiliar, but strangely calm now, and after that inundated hour, I finally feel composed again." Now try building your own sentence, out loud, describing your actual surroundings right now, using at least one word from today. Apprehensive, daunting, unfamiliar, disoriented, resilient, composed, meticulous, approachable, candid, upfront, blunt, tactful, constructive, versatility, aptitude, competent, forthright, inundated, exasperated, tenacious, prudent, resourceful, reassure, or initiative. Take a real moment to say this out loud. Even if it feels a little awkward at first, that awkwardness is exactly where fluency starts. Nice work. That kind of practice, applied to your actual life, your actual room, your actual day, is worth more than an hour of passive listening because you generated the sentence yourself, which means your brain has to actually own the word, not just recognize it. Let's do one more phonetics moment before we continue the story. In fast speech, kind of almost always compresses into kinda, and going to becomes gonna. Small shifts that make an enormous difference in how natural you sound. Listen to the contrast, slowly and formally. That is exactly the kind of initiative I was hoping to find. Naturally, the way it's actually spoken, that's exactly the kind of initiative I was hoping to find. Try saying the fast, natural version yourself. Twice, letting kind of soften into one quick, blended sound. Type 1 when you're ready to continue, and we'll follow Daniel through the quieter, more personal second half of his day into a conversation that changes how he sees this new chapter of his life. Entirely. Lunch ends, and the afternoon settles into a different rhythm, slower, more collaborative. Less about crisis and more about connection. Daniel finds himself walking toward the break room around 2:30, coffee cup in hand. Again? When he runs into Priya again. This time without the pressure of a meeting room or a client emergency hanging over the conversation. She's leaning against the counter, waiting for the coffee machine to finish, and she waves him over with an easy, genuine smile. Let's picture this moment fully before we listen. The break room is small, sunlit, a little cluttered with mismatched mugs, and there's a comfortable quiet to it, the kind of space where honest conversations tend to happen almost by accident. Priya glances at Daniel and asks the kind of question colleagues only ask once they've decided they actually like you. Listen to the full conversation first. Priya says, "So be honest. How are you holding up? Today was not exactly a gentle introduction to this place." Daniel laughs and says, "Honestly, I'm still a little in shock. This morning I was apprehensive about just finding the right elevator, and by 11 I was drafting crisis statements." Priya replies, "That's this office in a nutshell, though. It's chaotic, but it's a genuinely congenial place once you settle in. Everyone actually likes each other here, which honestly isn't that common." Daniel says, "I noticed that, actually. Everyone seems really empathetic. Even in the middle of a crisis, nobody was blaming each other. They were just solving the problem." Priya nods and says, "Grace built the team that way on purpose. She always says a discerning leader hires for kindness first, skill second, because skill can be taught, but kindness usually can't." Daniel says, "That's honestly a really credible philosophy, and it explains a lot about today. Let's shadow this together, piece by piece. So, be honest, how are you holding up?" Again, a little faster and warmer, the way a real friend would ask it. "How are you holding up?" Now Daniel's response. "Honestly, I'm still a little in shock." One more time. "This morning I was apprehensive about just finding the right elevator." Let's take these new words one at a time, because this block is really about the emotional texture of a workplace, not just the tasks inside it. Congenial describes an atmosphere, a place, or a group of people that is pleasant, friendly, and easy to be around, specifically because the people involved genuinely get along well together. It's a warmer, more specific upgrade from just saying, a workplace is nice. Shadow this. It's a genuinely congenial place to work. Again, the whole team has a congenial atmosphere. One more time. Congenial. Empathetic describes someone who is able to understand and share the feelings of another person. Passes to genuinely sense what someone else is going through. Not just intellectually understand it, but actually feel some version of it alongside them. It's one of the most valued human qualities in English-speaking workplaces, and it's often specifically praised the way Daniel praises it here. Shadow it. Everyone here seems really empathetic. Again, she's an incredibly empathetic listener. One more time. Empathetic. Discerning describes someone who has or shows good judgment, especially the ability to notice and understand things that aren't obvious to everyone, particularly about people or quality. A discerning leader, as Priya describes Grace, notices things below the surface, character, potential, warning signs, long before they become obvious to everyone else. Shadow this. A discerning leader hires for kindness first. Again, she has a remarkably discerning eye for talent. One more time. Discerning and credible, describing something that is believable and trustworthy, capable of being trusted or believed, often used specifically to describe an argument. A source, or, as Daniel uses it here, a philosophy or point of view. Shadow it. That's honestly a really credible philosophy. Again, he gave a credible explanation for the delay. One more time. Credible. Let's practice the role switch technique one more time here, because this conversation is exactly the kind of honest, reflective exchange you might have with a new colleague or friend. In English. Someday. Here's Priya's original question again. So, be honest, how are you holding up? Pause the video now and answer as yourself, genuinely, using today's vocabulary, if you can, congenial, empathetic, discerning, credible, or any of the words from earlier in the story. Take a real moment to answer honestly. Here's a model answer for comparison. Honestly, it's been an intense day, but a good one. I've been genuinely surprised by how congenial and empathetic everyone has been, even under pressure, and it's made a daunting first day feel a lot more manageable. Notice how naturally that response blends real emotion with precise, advanced vocabulary, exactly the balance you're building toward. The afternoon continues, quieter now, and Daniel spends most of it organizing his desk, reviewing old campaign materials, and slowly, carefully, becoming a little more articulate about the brand voice he's expected to write in. Articulate, used as an adjective here, describes someone who is able to express their thoughts and ideas clearly and effectively, fluently, and with precision. Notice this is different from just talkative. Articulate specifically implies clarity and precision, not just quantity of words. Shadow this. He's becoming more articulate about the brand's voice. Again, she's one of the most articulate speakers I know. One more time. Articulate. Around 4 o'clock, Grace stops by Daniel's desk one final time before the day winds down, and this conversation carries a different, more reflective energy than anything else today. Less about tasks, more about how Daniel is actually feeling, now that the adrenaline has faded. Let's set the scene. The office light has shifted, softer now, late afternoon gold spilling across the desks. Most of the team quietly focused on their screens, the earlier chaos completely gone. Grace pulls a chair over, sits down across from Daniel, and asks a genuinely open question. Listen to the full conversation first. Grace says, "So, first day, crisis included. How are you actually feeling?" Not the polite answer, the real one. Daniel pauses, then says, "Honestly, I feel a strange mix. I'm exhausted, but also kind of invigorated, like today proved something to me I wasn't sure was true this morning." Grace asks, "What weren't you sure was true?" Daniel says, "That I could actually handle this. Moving here felt daunting for weeks, and this morning I was genuinely disoriented, unsure I'd made the right decision at all." Grace nods thoughtfully and says, "That's a very honest answer. And for what it's worth, today was genuinely gratifying to watch. Not just the crisis response, but how quickly you adjusted." Daniel replies, "That actually means a lot. I've been pretty introspective about this whole move, wondering if I was being reckless rather than brave." Grace smiles and says, "From where I'm sitting, it looks a lot more like resilience than recklessness. Let's shadow this piece by piece, slowly at first. So, first day, crisis included. How are you actually feeling?" Again, faster. "How are you actually feeling?" The real answer. Now Daniel's response. "Honestly, I feel a strange mix." One more time. "I'm exhausted, but also kind of invigorated." Let's break these words apart, because this is one of the emotional peaks of today's story. Invigorated describes feeling energized, refreshed, and full of life, often after something intense or challenging. The opposite of drained. Even though it might follow something exhausting, it's a beautiful contradiction and exactly what Daniel feels, tired and energized at the same time. Shadow this. "I feel exhausted, but also kind of invigorated." Again, that workout always leaves me feeling invigorated. One more time. Invigorated. Gratifying describes something that gives pleasure or satisfaction, especially because it confirms your effort was worthwhile, or that something turned out well after uncertainty. Grace uses it here specifically to praise Daniel. Watching him succeed today was personally satisfying for her as his manager. Shadow it. Today was genuinely gratifying to watch. Again, it's always gratifying to see someone grow into a role. One more time. Gratifying. Introspective. Describes someone examining their own thoughts and feelings, looking inward, reflecting deeply on their own mind, rather than focusing outward on the world. Daniel has clearly been introspective about his decision to move, questioning himself, turning the choice over in his mind again and again. Shadow this. I've been pretty introspective about this whole move. Again, she's naturally introspective, always reflecting on her choices. One more time. Introspective. And finally, in this exchange, recklessness, the noun form of reckless, meaning acting without thinking carefully about danger or consequences. And its gentle opposite here, resilience, which we already learned earlier today, as resilient, now appearing in its noun form. Notice how Grace deliberately reframes Daniel's fear from recklessness and irresponsible choice to resilience and admirable strength. And that reframing is really the emotional heart of this entire story. Shadow this final contrast. That looks a lot more like resilience than recklessness. Again, slower, letting the contrast really land. Resilience, not recklessness. Let's practice the role switch technique one final time with this scene. Because Grace's question, "How are you actually feeling?" not the polite answer, is one of the most genuinely useful questions you can learn to answer honestly in English. Pause the video now and answer for real using invigorated, gratifying, introspective, resilient, or any word from today's story. Take a real moment. Here's a model answer for comparison. Honestly, I feel invigorated. Today felt daunting at first, but it turned out to be genuinely gratifying, and I've been introspective enough to realize this is exactly the kind of challenge I needed. Notice, again, how naturally these advanced words carry real, specific emotion, not vague feelings, but precise, honest ones. Take a breath with me here. Because this is the emotional turning point of the whole story, the moment where Daniel stops seeing his move as a risk and starts seeing it as proof of who he actually is. We're almost through his first day together, and I want you to notice how far both of you have come, Daniel, inside the story, and you inside this lesson. Type 1 when you're ready, and we'll finish Daniel's story together with his quiet walk home, his final reflection, and our full fluency round, where you'll get to sweep through every single word from today. One more time before we close out this lesson. The workday ends the way most days do, quietly, without ceremony, laptops closing one by one, chairs pushed in, quiet goodbyes exchanged across the office. Daniel gathers his things slowly, in no particular hurry, and steps outside just as the sky begins to soften into early evening color, the same uncertain gray from this morning, now replaced with something warmer, almost golden. He starts walking, not toward his apartment immediately, but in a slow, thoughtful loop through a few unfamiliar streets, letting the city settle around him a little more gently than it did this morning. And here, in this quiet, reflective walk, is where Daniel's internal narration becomes our final vocabulary review, A chance for you to hear every single word from today woven naturally into one continuous, honest reflection, exactly the way a fluent speaker's mind actually moves. Listen to this closing reflection first, all the way through, letting it settle the same way settle. Daniel lets his day settle. This morning, Daniel thinks, I felt apprehensive before I even left my apartment. Everything about this city, this job, this whole decision felt daunting and unfamiliar. Walking into that building, I was genuinely disoriented for a second, wondering if I'd made a reckless choice rather than a resilient one. But I tried to stay composed, even when I felt anything but. And somehow, that composure carried me further than I expected. Grace turned out to be exactly what people warned me about. Meticulous, careful, precise, but also unexpectedly approachable. And when she asked for something candid, I gave her something up front instead of pretending I had it all figured out. Marcus was blunt. Marcus Blunt. Honestly, more blunt than I was ready for. But Priya was tactful enough to translate my feedback into something constructive. And somehow, the whole exchange left me feeling more capable, not less. Then came the crisis, and I still can't quite believe how naturally I responded. Marcus was inundated with calls, clearly exasperated by the third one, but Grace stayed remarkably tenacious, and Priya's instinct was, Yina, as always, prudent. I don't know exactly where it came from, but in that moment, I felt resourceful instead of panicked. And when Grace called it initiative, I felt something reassure itself quietly inside me. A confirmation I didn't know I needed. At lunch, Priya reminded me how congenial this place actually is, how empathetic everyone stayed even under pressure, and she mentioned that Grace is discerning enough to hire for kindness first, which honestly felt like the most credible explanation for why today, despite everything, felt less brutal than it should have. I think I'm becoming more articulate too, not just about the brand, but about myself, about what I actually want from this new chapter. And when Grace asked how I really felt, not the polite answer, the honest one, I told her the truth, that I felt exhausted but invigorated, that today had been genuinely gratifying in a way I hadn't expected, that I'd been quietly introspective about this whole move for weeks, terrified it was reckless rather than resilient. And she looked at me and said something I don't think I'll forget for a long time. From where I'm sitting, it looks a lot more like resilience than recklessness. Now, let's shadow this final reflection together in shorter pieces, letting each phrase echo naturally. This morning, I felt apprehensive. Everything felt daunting and unfamiliar. Again, a little faster and smoother. I felt apprehensive. Everything felt daunting and unfamiliar. One more time. Apprehensive, daunting, unfamiliar. Continue with me. I was disoriented for a second, wondering if I'd been reckless instead of resilient. Again, disoriented, reckless, resilient. Now the next stretch. I stayed composed, even when meticulous, approachable Grace asked me to be candid and upfront. Again, a little faster. Composed, meticulous, approachable, candid, upfront. Keep going with me. Marcus was blunt, Priya was tactful, and the feedback became constructive. Again, blunt, tactful,
Constructive.
Now this next section, a little longer. Marcus was inundated, exasperated, but Grace stayed tenacious, and Priya's advice was prudent. Again, a little faster this time. Inundated, exasperated, tenacious, prudent. Continue. I felt resourceful. Grace called it initiative, and something inside me finally felt reassured. Again, resourceful, initiative, reassure. Now the workplace felt congenial, everyone empathetic, Grace discerning, her philosophy credible, and I felt myself becoming articulate. Again, smoother, faster, congenial, empathetic, discerning, credible, articulate, and finally, the emotional close. I felt invigorated. The day was gratifying. And after being so introspective, I finally believed this was resilience, not recklessness. One last time, slowly, letting every word land with weight. Invigorated, gratifying, introspective, resilience, not recklessness. Nice work, genuinely. That fluency round just carried you through every single word from today's entire story, back to back, the exact way a fluent English speaker's mind actually connects ideas. Quickly, naturally, without stopping to translate a single one. Before we close, I want you to do one thing, right now, while this story is still fresh. In the comments, write one sentence about your own day, using at least one word from today. Apprehensive, daunting, resilient, composed, candid, tactful, constructive, tenacious, resourceful, empathetic, discerning, invigorated, gratifying, introspective, any of them. Not a perfect sentence, just an honest one. The way Daniel gave Grace an honest answer instead of a polite one. That single sentence, written in your own real words, will do more for your fluency than replaying this video 5 times without ever speaking. Daniel reaches his apartment, just as the last light fades from the sky. And for the first time since he arrived in this city, the space doesn't feel quite so unfamiliar anymore. It's still new, still a little quiet, still missing the small, comfortable details that only come with time. But it feels, for the first time, like a place he might actually be building something real inside of, not despite the apprehension of this morning. But somehow, strangely, because of it, if today's story helped you feel these words instead of just memorizing them, subscribe to Natural Word English, because every lesson here is built exactly this way. Real characters, real moments, real advanced vocabulary you'll actually reach for the next time. Life asks something daunting of you. I'll see you in the next story.